Hello, I'm Jeanine Skorinko, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what the work I do as a social psychologist. Constantly in our world, as we go about our days, we're bombarded with different stimuli that our brains have to deal with, right? So for instance, I've now provided you with a stimulus. You are automatically perceiving that stimulus, right? And your pre-existing beliefs about, say, Taylor Swift are automatically being activated. You might even be thinking about the song Shake It Off and whether or not that's a good karaoke song or not. And you may be wanting to tell people about your attitudes about this, right? So the research that I do in my lab is really looking at all this information we're bombarded with, right? So how do these factors in our social environments, especially this subtle stuff, right? The stuff that we're not necessarily aware of, how does that influence how we perceive our world around us? What about our attitudes? What about the decisions that we make, or even how we interact with other people? So one way that we do this in my lab is by looking at social perception, so how we perceive the world around us. So I want you to just take a second and think about your first impressions of Sam. Now, what if I had shown you this picture instead? Do your perceptions change? And what we found in this study is that when Sam is holding the alcoholic beverage, she's perceived as being less human, right? So she's perceived as being more robotic, colder. She's also perceived as being more sexually available than when Sam's holding a water bottle. Now, it's not just our perceptions, but think about the implications of that, right? If we're interacting with Sam, who's holding the alcoholic beverage, we're going to interact with her very differently than if she's holding the water bottle, right? We're not just interested in how we perceive those around us, we're also interested in the transmission of attitudes that we have. So how do they move person to person? To study this, I rely on a framework that's called social tuning. So this is when we unconsciously align our views toward an interaction partner. So for instance, let's say that you and I are interacting, and you learned that I love Taylor Swift. And in particular, I really love the song Shake It Off. Now, as we're interacting, you now start telling me that you too love Taylor Swift, and you might even agree to karaoke Shake It Off with me, right? Yeah, that's for you. That is the social tuning. You don't realize that you're doing it. Maybe way down the line, you'll be like, why did I say that? I don't even like T Swift. But maybe you don't have that recognition, right? So we know social tuning occurs. We want to understand when and why. So how would we do this in the lab? Well, participants will come into the lab. They might learn that they're going to interact with someone. And then somehow they're going to learn something about their partner, right? So some kind of attitude or viewpoint that their partner has. So maybe one way we do this is their partner is wearing either a plain t-shirt that expresses no views, or they're wearing a t-shirt that has some kind of views on it. So in this case, it says every body is beautiful, right? So giving us some kind of attitude about how they think about body image. And then we would measure what their implicit and explicit attitudes are towards those messages. So what we have found, right, is that the desire to get along with individuals, what we call affiliative motivation, that leads to social tuning. We also have found that's really important for Westerners, but for Easterners, so those with a collectivist orientation, they are more likely to do this automatically. Right? And so we're trying to figure out more about when social tuning occurs and when it doesn't. I'm also interested in the social applications of all of this, right? So in the lab, what we study are these perceptions and the transmission of attitudes in the courtroom and also in the workplace. And we're also starting to address some real-world questions. So one of the projects that we're doing right now is looking at individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. They experience abuse 7 times the rate of a non-IDD population. So I'm working with the Disabled Persons Protection Commission and some other colleagues and individuals with IDD to understand if we can develop assistive technologies to help people with IDD recognize, respond, and report abuse. In addition, one of the things you might have heard about is this NSF Advanced Grant that we've had. So we are looking at our attitudes and our perceptions of what's valued, what's good scholarship, those kinds of things, to understand how we're going to make decisions about the promotion and advancement of faculty, so that way we can have a more inclusive and more equitable promotion process. So Overall, my research is looking at what creates social divides and how to understand that, but also what brings us together and how we can be more inclusive and make decisions that are more open-minded that way. And my last slide was supposed to be WPI psychology rules.